So it's not for kids.
What's your favorite tank engine?
You know, yesterday you asked me this and I said Percy because I didn't want to be like a narcissist, but actually like Thomas. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, I think this is one of the rare ones where you just say the main character. 'Cause everybody else is so shit on that show.
Actually, the most based character probably is Sir Topham Hatt. I think that show is like designed in retrospect. It's like all the trains are supposed to be children. And then like Sir Topham Hatt is just like the exhausted adult of the series who's like, like fucking hell. Yeah, exactly.
What if daycare but giant metal trains?
Yeah. Like, can you imagine actually being put in charge of like a series of trains that have the mindsets of toddlers and are like constantly fucking falling off the tracks on their own accord and like getting like rolling in mud and who knows, like whatever else they're getting up to, and you just have to deal with that, and it's a fucking train. It's like 3 times the size of you.
I love the juxtaposition of just the sheer amount of force that they can exert and like their level of maturity.
I think that's probably what made the show work, at the end of the day.
Trains not so popular with kids in the US.
It's
in
a
Japan
tragedy.
And in the UK, it's like a big thing.
I've heard it's like kind of like a conspiracy. It's like manufactured consent.
What?
We get them off thinking about trains. They just don't think about public transit at all. They're like, oh, I want to own cars. I want to drive cars. I don't want to ride the
big
train.
Automobile?
Yeah, it's like another push to keep people complacent with this individualistic driving experience instead of, commuter solutions.
Welcome to Shelf Stable, a podcast celebrating board games that have stood the test of time. I'm your host, Kenny Katayama.
And I'm the other host, Tom Browers. Today, our featured topic is gaming with your family. Are you ready for it?
Gaming with trains.
Gaming with trains, with your family. But before we talk about that, we'll talk about some of the things we've just been playing this week. Kenny?
Thank you, Tom. This week, I played Ethnos from 2017. This is my favorite design by Paolo Mori, and it is published surprisingly by CMON. Ethnos is a game where you got a bunch of different fantasy races and you shuffle them together, and then you kind of do an area control where you take cars and you try to put the most of your colored pieces in different parts of the map. But the secret is it's not actually area control. It's just tracks. They're just tracks that are dressed up to look like a map. This is very like Lord of the Ringsia, and we're in the northern plains of Dunshire, or whatever the hell. And so I think thematically you're rallying up the different races of creatures. The whole thing feels a little weird. I'm just going to be honest. They did a reprint of this more recently called Archaeos Society, which was like, now it's archaeologists that are taking artifacts that aren't theirs and putting them in museums. And
that's better, right?
Yeah, I just had my hand on my forehead like, what? But anyway, the gameplay, however, super sweet, snappy, fun. I like to compare this game to Ticket to Ride, and then everybody tells me this game is not like Ticket to Ride. So, take it as a grain of salt.
So what do you know, Kenny?
Really, like you're taking cards from a visible supply, and then you're playing sets of cards that match together to put things on the board. Like, that's Ticket to Ride. Yeah. What I like more about this game versus Ticket to Ride is that when you put things down, each of the 6 races that you're playing with in that particular game has their own mini game or has their own ability. And they play together in very interesting ways. They play off each other. You get quite a bit of like dynamic changes in the gameplay based on which ones are included. And I like how simple the abilities are, despite creating a lot of variety, a lot of dynamic. So Ethnos was a hit. This game was a 3-player one. Everybody knew how to play too. And we kind of just breezed through it. I feel like I overvalue skeletons.
Well, who wouldn't?
And then I play all the skeletons and I get 0 points because the skeletons, they don't do anything. They're just there to help you get to whatever other thing you're doing, but they themselves don't score. And I'm like, hell yeah. Look at all these skeletons I got. Well, I guess it's thematic in a certain sense, right? You got an army of skeletons. They're just going to fall apart when they try to fight other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What you can do, throw a bunch of skeletons at a giant?
Like, haven't you seen Jason and the Argonauts?
Yeah, exactly.
He just pushes them over at the end. I've never seen Jason and the Argonauts.
I haven't either.
Oh.
I think there's a new version of this coming out, and I'm not a huge fan. I have some thoughts about the new theme.
Okay.
One, it's doing the typical, like, we're doing this in some non-deterministic Asia. But on top of that, they're like, but what if we do cyberpunk anthropomorphic animals? Like, it's literally like an AI just spit out all the generia that's in modern board gaming and put it in one package. Like, I don't understand.
Gotcha. It's like, well, I don't know. I hate accusing things of being AI gen because you never really know, and it can kind of like hurt artists' feelings quite a bit. So I just don't like to venture there often. Yeah, but I hear what you're saying though, where it just doesn't feel particularly inspired. It's like,
to me, it feels very manufactured based on psychographic profiles, I guess, or whatever. We just got Archaeos Society. We just got a reprint of this. Why are we doing another reprint? It just feels like arbitrary. I get that this game is popular. Either just reprint the original one or push the one you just made. I feel like it's strange to do a third theme. The cherry on top is that they did the Medici thing where your player colors are blue, green, turquoise, aquamarine, and shiny blue. And I'm just like, the accessibility is such an issue in this game. Like, the original Ethnos has really bright neon colors for each player. Like, there's no is that my piece or yours? And then, like, with this one, they're like, hold my beer, let's make this as hard to distinguish as possible for people who are colorblind. I mean, even people who aren't colorblind, like, I'm looking at these pictures and I'm just like, oh, those are two colors. Those are two different colors. And then I look in the comments and somebody literally just said that.
You do always compare this to Ticket to Ride with varying degrees of success, actually bridging that comparison when other people actually get to play it. I do see where you're coming from in comparing it to Ticket to Ride. It's got that simplicity of your turn sort of decisions. Do I draw a card or do I play a card kind of thing, right? It is an evolution of that mechanic. I feel somewhat indifferent about this game. Ever since the episode with Nick Bentley, I feel kind of fucked up because it's like, this is a game where I'm like, I could see myself playing this 100 times and feeling a lot differently about it. And I'm probably going to be saying that a lot for the next few weeks because I'm thinking about that all the time now. But having only played it like twice, I didn't find it I still have not found it very compelling. And I know you complain about Ticket to Ride for being like kind of boring. So what is it about Ethnos that like makes it not boring when Ticket to Ride has become boring?
I think that what Ethnos adds, like you said, basically it's an evolution of the similar kinds of concepts. The fact that it's modular in that you shuffle 6 different mini games and that those games play together, they don't feel disparate. That's what makes Ethnos interesting to me. It's almost like you added a little bit of like collectible card game feel to what was Ticket to Ride. And the reason that Ticket to Ride is boring to me is because it always feels the same. I feel like Ethnos enhances / improves upon that model. I also really like in Ethnos that once cards are in your hand, there are still decision points about how you use them. It's how do I arrange these cards in a sequence to play them? Do I do it based on color or based on race? And then the second thing is, these cards are going to go back into the available market because any cards you don't play in Ethnos are going to go back up for grabs. I'd be kind of interested to play Ticket to Ride with the grab a card, play a card rules from Ethnos. I feel like they would translate directly from game to game. Just saying it out loud makes me kind of interested to try Ticket to Ride with those rules. Like that rule alone where you only take 1 card per turn, and when you play your cards, any cards that you still have in hand go back into the market.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Because that's more to think about.
Yeah, I could see that. That could be an interesting experiment is to like modify Ticket to Ride to play like Ethnos. Yeah, Ticket to Ethnos.
It's Ethnos from 2017.
All right, Kenny. I'm going to talk about KingDomino. It's from 2016 by Bruno Cathala, published by Blue Orange. KingDomino is great. I feel like I know what many people listening to this might say. They might go, it's not that great. It's like a gateway game at best. And you're right. And that is what makes it so great. It's fast. It's simple. It's intuitive. And it's cute. And it's fun. I'm still like dog shit at this game. I literally have lost to children every time I've played it against them. So I don't know why my brain is so bad at this one. But this is one, it plays so quickly. And it's so easy to set up and just get rolling. If you haven't played this in a while, revisit it because it's refreshing, I guess, like how simple this is to, get started with. And just like chunk, 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 like you're just taking the dominoes, you're moving your kings around, it's flying around. I think I've seen this show up in lists a lot as like a great sort of 2-player head-to-head experience. And I think that's also absolutely true. It's like it's got a nice amount of blocking and interactivity, especially in 2-player.
Yeah, do you prefer it with 2 players or 4?
I kind of enjoy playing it at any player count, but the 2-player experience I think is a little bit more interesting.
I agree.
I think I feel that way about a lot of games though, to be completely fair, that like the 2-player experience might be better. But it's mostly just because like you have less to worry about. This game could have a bit more of a king-making situation if all the players realize someone is pulling way ahead.
KingDomino making situation?
Yeah, exactly. Like if they got like 4 crowns, on water, and they're just taking every water tile, it's kind of in the rest of the player's best interest to start taking more water tiles. And that can be harder to recognize in a multiplayer game. And I think it's a little more satisfying if you play it head-to-head and you can recognize what your opponent is going for more easily because you only have the one other person to worry about.
Yeah, I'm with you. I enjoy this much more at 2. I'm definitely in the camp of folks that you're talking about that feel like this is a good gateway game. But for me, like KingDomino is it's like vanilla ice cream. Like it's fun, it's enjoyable, but I'm never coming out of a game of KingDomino like, wow, it's not one of those drive home thinking about it kind of games. I don't see this ever getting on my list of top games. But at the same time, like I'd much rather be playing this than a lot of games. So
do you think you would feel differently if you did the BGA test with this? Do you think it would like drive some interest if you went online, tried to play it, got crushed? You're like, hold on, there's more going on than I thought.
I do think there is more going on than I thought, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm not having a great time playing it. And I don't think it would make me want to play it more.
Interesting. I feel like me playing this most recently, it was because it was after our recording with Nick that I was like, oh, this is like a candidate game, right? As in, like, This is a game that I could churn 100 games of, especially if I played it online, because it's so quick and the rules are so simple that there's more to explore strategically.
I think I would just, more than anything, I'd be annoyed if I had to play 100 games of KingDomino.
You think you'd rather do 100 games of this or 100 games of Splendor, though?
Oh, that's tough. They're so similar in terms of my opinion. They're just both very inoffensive, enjoyable games that I wouldn't want to play 100 times on BGA. I would just flip a coin, honestly.
It's an interesting mindset, I guess, that we're coming at this from 2 different ways. Because I've also been thinking that about Splendor a little bit. Just like, probably another game that I'm underappreciating.
I do have an answer. Mm-hmm. I would rather play 100 games of KingDomino. And the reason why is because KingDomino is a lot shorter.
Oh, okay. You just get through it faster.
Like I said on the discussion, I'm much more willing to put in the time for a game that doesn't overstay its welcome.
I feel like the last time I played Splendor, it was probably like on the app. Like, I feel like Splendor can be quick, but it definitely relies on nobody thinking too much. Like, there's a lot to ponder in that game relative to KingDomino. And again, if no one really knows how to sort of rush the end game trigger, it can go on for ages.
Yep. It's KingDomino from 2016. I played one from the great Chuck Tucker, Glory to Rome 2012, the Black Box Proxy Edition. Originally, this game came out in 2005, though.
How many tucks could a Chudyk tuck if it Carl could chuck Chudyk? Could tuck Chudyk. Damn it. Okay, hold on. Let me do it again. How many tucks could a Chudyk tuck if a Carl... Fuck! How many tucks...
Glory to Rome is a multi-use card game. You hear me talk about Motainai all the time. This is the OG Motainai. Motainai is an iteration upon this design. I think there are a few others, like Uchronia. When people are like, I love multi-use cards, it's very important as a board gamer to be as gatekeepy as possible and say, oh yeah, have you played Glory to Rome? Oh, you haven't? Oh, and you like multi-use cards? So that's the first thing. Glory to Rome exists to be as pretentious as possible. But outside of that, it's also a pretty fun game. We talked about this recently. This is one of the games that you print and play because due to the crazy history of the game, it costs like $200 to $1,000. Yeah, I know. I was saying like $200 to $300 last time we talked about it. Turns out that in shrink, it's going for $1,000 on eBay. Yeah, highly recommend not buying it and just printing it out. Mm-hmm. This is a classic for a reason. I don't think its rarity overplays its gameplay. Well, I think the rarity does blow it out of proportion to a certain extent, but there's no denying this is a solid game. It's one of those games where every time you play a card, you're like, this is insane. Did they balance this? But then you play it through the game and you're like, no, it seemed pretty balanced. Mm-hmm. At its core, every turn you discard a card for its action ability, and then other people can follow you by discarding the same card. And then you resolve those actions, oftentimes reusing the cards that were discarded in interesting and creative ways. Like one way is you can regenerate them as resources. The other thing you can do is convert them into workers that basically double your actions in the future for that, that particular action. And then the last thing you can do is turn cards into points, like convert them into points at the end of the game. But the way you have to do all of this is you have to build buildings. And that's like actually playing the card for its ability as opposed to for resources or workers. And that takes a number of actions, a number of turns. The flip side to it being a lot of an investment is that the buildings are broken. There is a building that says whenever you discard the card that you used for an action, whether you're following another player or you're the player that's leading, you just get that card as a resource. It doesn't go to the center. You just get it. There was another card that somebody had that was like, whenever you get a resource card, you just get another one. You just pick one from your hand and put it. Like, there's just a lot of like kind of insane things that you can do almost instantly once you build buildings. People often are used to the modern paradigm of set up an engine, start doing resource generation, then play cards that have synergies with yours, and then accumulate a huge amount of points. In Glory to Rome, there's a very different arc to the game. Find a card that goes well with this other card and go, oh, okay. Try to build them out as fast as possible. And then that's it. That's the game. Because usually the moment you get some kind of like what you would normally think of as an engine going, the game devolves into like these broken combos. Mm-hmm. And the person that does that broken combo faster than anyone else is going to A, end the game, and B, win the game.
Wow.
It's refreshing. It sometimes can be a little harrowing the first time you do it. You're left almost with this like, what just happened kind of feeling. Mm-hmm. But after that, I think it clicks with a lot of people. I will say, even though Motainai is still like one of my favorite games of all time, Glory to Rome is easier to teach and easier to grok. I almost feel like moving forward, I won't ever introduce Motainai from the get-go to people. I'm going to be like, let's play Glory to Rome. And when I've sold you on how cool this is, I'll show you Motainai. And you'll probably say that you like Glory to Rome more, and I'll cry. Hey, if I can get people to play Glory to Rome with me, but not Motainai, I'll consider that a win.
Why do you think Glory to Rome is more grokkable then? Because is it just like the theme helps more?
There are minute differences. So when you build something, The building action is progressive. So the first time you take the action, you get to place a foundation that's announcing that you're starting work on something that you're building. In Motainai, you're like, you build it all at once.
Gotcha.
And that's just conceptually a lot more difficult because, it's hard to teach it. And then once people understand it, they're like, what? So you're telling me I have to have 2 of these resources, but then the card itself counts as one of them? Like, there's all these weird things in Motainai. Yeah, the other thing is this game has a much more traditionalist approach to things like drawing cards and, taking actions. In Motainai, they're like, oh, no, you don't just draw cards. You put them to a side area that you draw at the end, and you don't discard cards. You put them to the bottom of the deck. Like, there's all these weird alien things. This one, Carl Chudyk revealed that he was an alien. Even something as simple as like discard your previous action when your turn starts and then play your action but resolve other people's before you resolve yours. Like that stuff in Motainai is like very fiddly. Whereas like Glory to Rome, you do it all at once, move on.
It just sounds like Motainai was a more technical evolution that had a lot of like decisions that they make sense when you've played it a lot, I'm sure, but they just add to the mental load, right?
Yep.
You have to subsume. Once Motainai clicked for me, I was like, wow, I think I get it, and I'm interested in it. It's exciting. It has like this cool, especially a 2-player, like push and pull. I am curious to try out Glory to Rome. Because it's print and play, I was thinking about this because one of our friends made a comment when you had like the print and play copy. He was like, I just like that original art or something like that. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? The original art looks like clip art, like Sunday, like church comic strips. I don't know how to explain it, but if you had the funds, you could like commission someone to make interesting looking cards out of this potentially. And then you could print those versions.
Oh yeah, people have definitely done variants of the art. There's like a board game YouTuber, I forget who, but they like released some files for their version and it looks really, really nice. I think the art is AI generated, so, disclaimer there. However, like they did a really good job in terms of making this game accessible and modern in terms of readability and usability.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's the most interesting thing about it to me is that you can almost customize the look. Since it's, pretty much impossible for anyone to acquire this game in the traditional sense. But yeah, I'll have to try this one out with you sometime because I did like Motainai, so it'd be interesting to see, if I end up being one of those people that makes you cry.
I have a sneaking suspicion that you're going to play this the first time and you're like, why do you like Motainai more than this? This is like significantly better. Tom, I feel like that's going to be the reaction. And, you're probably right.
I won't be surprised either, I guess, is what I'll say.
Yeah. This Glory to Rome from 2012, originally 2005.
All right, Kenny, I know this was making you groan when I was putting it in the show notes, but we got to talk about it. It's Food Chain Magnate from 2015. We've talked about this before. I think last time it was you highlighting this, so I wanted to give my thoughts. This is designed by Jeroen, Doumen, and Joris Wiersinga, published by Splotter Spellin, our favorite, most controversial board game publisher. I've been thinking about this last session a lot. The first thing I'll say is that, I already gave this out in our Discord group, but I kind of owe everyone an apology for having such a negative Nancy mindset at the table. I definitely went into it like knowing what I was signing up for, and instead of embracing that, I continued to be a hater.
Yeah, it was tough because like we started pretty late in the night too.
Yes.
I feel like we probably shouldn't have played it.
That was the other major mistake that I think we can all agree we made was everyone was jonesing for it, and I can understand that. I said this before, I probably should have just spectated knowing how late it was going to be. But somehow in my mind, I was like, we're going to get through this in like 2 hours, right? Everyone's experienced. This game can be quick. But I don't know how I got off thinking that because like, no, the game still took like almost 4 hours. We didn't even officially finish it, right?
Yeah, we also made one of the Kenny no-nos as far as my rules are concerned, which is playing a turn-based game with more than 4 players. We played this at the full 5-player count.
Right. We maxed out on this one. So mistakes were made in that sense. I knew what I was getting into. And even knowing what I was getting into, this is probably like the fourth time officially that I've played this. It might be as much as the sixth time. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a stranger to food chain. This is a brutal game, and it punishes people that don't know what they're doing, and I still don't know what the fuck I am doing in this fucking game. Despite that, I actually wanted to bring this up because like I almost feel like I'm being misunderstood by the group at large. Because especially toward the end of it, it felt like everyone was like trying to comfort me and be like, "It's okay, bro. You know, some games just aren't for people like you. You're like a special guy that likes KingDomino."
I think I literally like patted you on the
exactly.
back. Like rubbed your shoulders.
You're just like a little chump that wants to play baby games. Like, be alert. Okay, it's like, we're sorry we dragged you into this. That's like almost how people started treating me toward the end. I'm like, no, like I just want to be good at this game, and I still don't get it. Like, I was complaining probably a little too much, and I was like arguing, like, why does anyone play this fucking shit? You know, that was wrong of me. I see the appeal, I really do, and it literally almost has like my balls in a fucking vice grip at this point, because I'm like, I was saying this at the table, like, I want to almost play this enough that I can just crush everyone next time we play it.
I think the quote was, "I hate this game so much that I want to play it 100 times just so I can make you all not want to play with me the next time you play it because I'll be so good."
Yeah, exactly. Because I'll have flipped the table on everyone and I'll be like dominating it so heavily that everyone will be like, okay, I have to scoop. There's no coming back from this, you know?
I just love the premise that you're like, oh, you want to play this? You want to play this? I've played 100 games of this and I hated all 100 of them just so I could make you not want to like the game too. It's just such a convoluted approach to it.
It's that meme, like 2,000 hours on record, not recommended. And I don't know. It's like, I probably shouldn't approach it with that mindset or I'll just never be happy. Like I thought about what you said, which is like, you sit there, you play it, and it's like funny things happen and you kind of get like funny storytelling out of it. It's highly interactive. That much I'll grant you. I guess I still don't quite understand why you enjoy sitting for 1 to 2 hours potentially. I think even in a 3-player game, it could drag on for over 30 minutes of you being logically eliminated. You are fucking done. You're cooked. There's no coming back. But you have to kind of go through the motions unless it's like exactly a 2-player game, because so many outcomes for the other players can kind of be determined by how much you continue to try to struggle.
I actually agree with you on that one.
Okay.
Like, I really think this is a game where you should scoop. And I think it's a game where even if it might affect the outcomes, players should feel comfortable leaving the table. And their existing stuff resolves, but after that, they're not part of the game anymore.
This is the game I probably most thought about when I said a while ago, like, this is a game that I wish had built-in exit strategy, like, kind of in the rules. To make it clear to players, like, and hopefully they do this in second edition. Hopefully they listen, and like at the last minute, they shove this in the rule book. You need to allow players to leave this game and make the other players feel like they didn't somehow get cheated out of the full experience. Because like a winning player is still going to feel like, you know, 50, 60, hundreds of dollars even like are sort of now up for grabs that weren't before. And it could kind of affect the outcomes.
I'm 100% with you on this. In our game, it was very clear that 2 players were winning and the other 3 were just kind of doing the motions. But the awkward thing was that if we either called it or the 3 that were losing left the table, it would affect the outcome. And so it's like, oh, we got to keep playing as optimally as possible just so we can see who actually wins it. I really wish that we had just acknowledged that that was going to be a thing, that we could leave the table, or that the rules, like you said, had a way to handle this. It's tough because like one of the players was playing a very long-term game and actually had the potential to come back and beat the person that was in first. But do we really sit here another 2.5 hours to see that happen? If we don't, then that player doesn't know what would have happened. You know, it's like it was like a really uncomfortable end game, I guess. Like I'm 100% with you on that part. Like I'm not going to pretend like, oh, that's one of the issues that Tom has. Like that's a game issue.
I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy for that, because I was thinking about that in retrospect. I was just like, is that worth it to you? Like to get the experience of playing Food Chain? The thing is that having played this most recently, I think a lot of people also misunderstood my anger as being like, I'm still playing this, losing hard, and not knowing what I did wrong. I actually do know what I did wrong, I think. Or at least I have an idea of what I should have done differently. And I could still be off base, right? With what I think I should have done. It might still not have worked. I'm grokking it. I'm getting it at a strategic level. And I think it's mostly just that last thing about it, where it's like in a multiplayer game, in order to satiate the players that are winning, you're stuck for way too long. That's my main issue. That's why I was saying like, oh, I hate this game. I don't understand why anyone plays it. Going forward, I think there's kind of like 2 rules I'm going to follow with this game. Number 1, be 100% prepared to lose no matter what. I might think I've finally gotten opening strategies down. I might have even played this online 100 times, like I said, and still just get crushed because someone, creates a strategy that I have not seen somehow. Number 2, never play this game above 3. 3 is my max.
I think those are really good rules. I'm willing to agree with them. Like we were talking about after the game, I think you're right in that this game's probably best at 2.
And then lastly, I think this is maybe just a side rule probably for all games, is like never start a game at midnight. I need to stop doing that. I'm too fucking old.
If it's like
play
be alert,
until 4,
if it's something that'll end in 10 minutes. But like, I agree with you. Never start a big game.
Only play Be Alert after midnight. Sorry to everyone who was playing with me at the table that night, but I will still play this again with the people that want to play this. Actually, crazy as I sound to say that, it's not exactly that I hate the game itself. I just really hated, feeling like it's 3 a.m. and there's still an hour of play left, and I'm not even playing anymore. I'm not even like in the running. I hate that about it,
For
but
good
I can
reason,
exactly. But I can respect it for everything else. Like there's something to this game. It is different than anything else kind of out there. And there's a lot to be appreciated about it and a lot to be said about it. This is the second time we're talking about it. I'm sure it won't be the last.
Yep.
So that's Food Chain Magnate from 2015.
100 games to play before you die.
All right, Kenny, this is the part of the podcast for those who are new to the show where we talk about the 100 games that you're supposed to play before you turn 100 years old. So if you're 99... get on it. Jimmy Carter, you're cooked. This is game number 16 this week, and that's Dread from 2004, designed by Nathaniel Barmore and Epidiah Ravachol, published by The Impossible Dream. Kenny, I've only said this once before, but what the fuck is this game? I haven't heard of it.
Dread is a role-playing game.
Okay, that explains a lot.
It's a one-shot role-playing game. It's the include for one-shots. One-shots are designed to be played in one session. You don't run a campaign with people coming back week to week. And there's a lot of appeal to these kinds of games. They're much more self-contained. They're designed to have a narrative arc that fits within the session, which means you get a little bit less of that build-up, but at the same time, you feel like you get the full experience in a sit down, a little bit more like a board game. Dread builds on emotional weight, emotional collateral in a way that a lot of other RPGs attempt to, but don't do as effectively or efficiently. At its core, Dread is D&D meets Jenga. Instead of rolling a D20, you have a huge Jenga tower in the middle, and every time you want to do something, or every time you have to avoid doing a bad thing, the DM is like, yeah, sure, you can do that. And you're like, what's the cash? And then they go, pull a brick or pull 2 bricks. The problem is that the person who makes the Jenga tower fall over dies. Their character comes to a gruesome death and is eliminated from the game. And normally the sessions are short enough that this is only going to happen once or twice. So this is not a game where, oh, everybody's going to be dead by the end or everybody survives. This is a game where you look at your fellow players around the table, and the DM might even say this at the beginning. They're like, by the end of this night, one of you will be dead. And nobody wants to be that person that dies, especially as the game kind of establishes characters and stakes are built up. It's really beautiful how this game functions. Like at the beginning, people are like laughing, and by, I want to say like an hour in, they are like fully invested and they do not want to die. And like the name entails, there's a certain level of dread that builds up across the table. The most memorable game of this that I played, it was actually one that I ran, which we played in the basement of my work's office, which looks like the place where a serial killer would go and carry out their murders. There's like chain link fences and a fan that just runs at random moments, and like the cement floors and everything. We were playing a cabin in the woods style. A bunch of teenagers, some know each other, some don't, go to a cabin, and all of a sudden these murders are starting to take place. And it was very thematic. It was very evocative to kind of be in this dimly lit area of cement floors and be talking about these potential murders that were happening around us. To me, dread is everything that I want out of an RPG. For me, a good RPG doesn't let its mechanics get in the way of the storytelling and elicits human emotions in its gameplay, I guess. I'm not interested in min-maxing. I'm not interested in learning a bunch of rule sets and things like that. When I play a tabletop RPG, I want to sit down and experience a story that we collectively work on together. Do not give me a bunch of compendiums that I have to purchase on their own so that I can just like build a wizard. That just drives me nuts.
I think I'm visualizing this game correctly. Like I've said on the other ones where, you know, I haven't heard of it. I think The Quiet Year was the other game like this. The premise has got me interested. I think the idea is really cool that it's like a D&D campaign, more or less, with a Jenga tower as your sanity check, right?
Yeah.
I like that idea. I think that the tension that creates fits the narrative structure it sounds like the game is going for. I think it's really smart.
Coincidentally, we had a white elephant recently, and I believe you got Alice is Missing as a white elephant gift. Alice is Missing is very much in the same vein, where it's an RPG that is a one-shot kind of session. It has an interesting gimmick to it, and it's very narrative-driven. You know, it's one where everybody's kind of invested emotionally in the story. So
it sounds like Alice is Missing, relative to some of these other types of games in this genre, is pretty approachable, I think.
Yeah, rules wise, I would say subject matter wise, maybe not.
Right. Yeah, it's like as long as you're an adult that watches like shows on HBO, probably like you can maybe manage to get through Alice is Missing. Yeah, all right, Kenny, I think it's time we get off of that bullshit, fucking get to the real meat and potatoes of this podcast, the part of the show that people come around, they stick around, they skip ahead for, the thing they actually care to listen to us yap about, and that's the main topic of this week's episode, gaming with your family. How to do it. We know there's a lot of listeners out there that probably are kind of inexperienced at this point, you know, in our divided political, socioeconomic conditions. It's just harder than ever to be around your own family these days, I think. So how do you repair those relationships? Maybe this is very explicitly my problem.
Yeah, let's start by saying this is not about repairing broken family ties. I don't think that board games are going to be that glue, or maybe it is. Tom, if that's what if you're expecting me to fix your family problems today, like, I don't know. I think let's set the bar a little bit lower.
I've thought about bringing Daybreak to Christmas and getting my family to play it to kind of first test how much of a hoax they think climate change is, but then second to actually learn them a thing about green energy solutions.
Well, maybe that's our first topic. Don't bring heavy games. Don't bring heavy games to. I think Daybreak is it's an excellent game, but that is not where you get your family members interested.
Speak for yourself. My family's based. Like now my family's really cool.
I think this is an important one. It's probably the first one that comes to mind for people. I'd say the larger thing is empathize with your audience and play a game that you think they would like, not the game that you want to play or a game that you want to force them to get into. If your thought is like, hey, I know they won't like this, but just stop there, you know? I know that if they play this enough times, they would really like it. You need to assume that they're only going to play it the one time. What's the reality that Nana's going to be like, I'm going to go out and buy a copy of this right now so I can play 100 times. I guess that's the first thing. Empathize with your audience. You know, I always complain about these roll and writes. The reality is that a roll and write is pretty approachable, especially if your family has played Yahtzee. This is me going on record that if it means playing a game with my relatives, I will play a roll and write. I will even be the one to suggest and bring a roll and write. Tom, I'm curious what you think about this, but I have a feeling like this segment is going to overlap quite a bit with the Gaming with Noobs one that we did way back.
Definitely depends on your family. I've had interesting successes with both noobs and family. So I feel like the one thing you can afford with your family, assuming that you get along well enough to actually sit at the table and play a game in the first place, is a little more risk than you can with like noobs, because probably by now your family knows you're the guy that always wants to play a board game. So they've accepted that about you, even if they don't respect it, right? And so most families, they're going to be willing to put up with one of your interests. Now, don't exploit this and start them on Food Chain Magnate unless you have like the coolest siblings in the world, I guess. But you don't have to seek the lowest mental ease.
No, that's a fair point. They kind of know what they're getting.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they're sitting down with you, it's like they probably can expect that you're gonna bring out something a little more interesting than Monopoly Deal. Although you should play Monopoly Deal. My siblings and even my parents, or my mom specifically, could probably handle something like Brass, crazy enough, because I've seen them do like Century Eastern Wonders, and we've played Cat in the Box even. And all of those have, I think, worked pretty well. I'm more likely to bring them something that I know they enjoyed playing last time at this point, because I think repeat plays would be more impactful than trying to get them into the next new thing. But at the same time, I think like, you know, there's a complexity level that they would be willing to accept at this point. And you can build that over time with your family. Whereas like with, you know, a newcomer to the hobby or someone that you don't normally play with.
Right. Yeah, the repeat plays thing especially, I want to highlight that because when we're talking about differences between noobs and your family, I agree that the family is going to be more aware of what they're getting into. On the flip side, I think that new players, they're open for whatever that whole night and they're willing to try a bunch of things. But your family is, at least personally what I've experienced is they want to play the thing that they really enjoy that you brought that one time. Repeat plays are going to have a lot more mileage. If the goal is to play something that everyone at the table is enjoying, or, you know, even to a lesser extent to get your family into board games, I think you're going to be a lot more successful if you come back with something they enjoyed in the past versus throwing that next thing at them. And I know that hurts as a board gamer. Like most of us just want to try a bunch of things, or, you know, even if we're not the ones that are like going out and trying 100 different games myself, I still think the average board gamer who's listening to this podcast probably has a much larger net of games that they like playing than their family members. And so, yes, your family only plays Ticket to Ride and that's all they want to play. But like, I guess I'm saying count your blessings. Bring that Ticket to Ride and just play another game of Ticket to Ride, because if that's what they're enjoying, that's better than them sitting around sulking in front of a game of Brass or something. One major difference with noobs is the age ranges. I don't think you're going to have a toddler coming to your game night. So let's talk a little bit about gaming with children for a second. Because you and I both have children, and we've both had varying successes and failures when it comes to parenting, when it comes to introducing board games. The one, if I had one lesson as a parent that I could tell people, it's that the age on the box, it doesn't have to do with comprehension. Like this thing drives me nuts when people are like, oh yeah, I taught my 4-year-old how to play Ark Nova, and I don't understand why people say it's so complicated. I'm sure your 4-year-olds can play it. The age means a lot of things on boxes. I'm making a generalization, but most of the time that number is not arbitrary. First of all, there's like legal implications with the age range. If you put an age that is below 14 and up, this is something I found out recently. My understanding is that you have to go through a certain level of scrutiny, at least in the US, when it comes to labeling or identifying the age for a board game, because at that point it's considered under the scrutiny of like the toys category.
Oh, okay. So there's like almost like is it a safety thing? Like almost choking hazard stuff, or is it?
I'm sure there's some safety, but there's also like the content itself and things like that. But basically, some publishers just don't want to deal with that. So they're going to put a 14 and up, even if kids that are below 14 could play it, just because they don't want to have to go through the hoops and the approvals that are necessary for that. Mm-hmm. The other thing is interest/desire. Because the game says 6 and up doesn't mean that a 4-year-old can't play it. It means that the 4-year-old's going to be bored like 5 minutes into it. I've experienced this dozens of times with my daughter, where she like will really want to play this game because it has Elsa and the Disney princesses in it. It's 6 and up. She understands how to play it. We start playing it, and then she loses interest as soon as there's any sort of card management, because A, she's not able to read the cards, and B, what we enjoy about those loops, those turn-based sequences that have interesting decision points, that's just something that a 4-year-old is not going to be able to internalize. And yeah, she understands all the rules. Like, she understands when it's her turn, draw a card, play a card, but she's not going to be able to take that extra step and be like, this is compelling gameplay, and look at all these decision points. Like, I feel like a 6-year-old could, depending on the level of complexity. Don't immediately think, oh, well, because it's 6 and up, that means the comprehension has to be at a 6 or older level. That means that maybe your 4-year-old could actually play it. It could also mean that there are other factors at play that make it so that this is not recommended for a 4-year-old.
I've experienced that in particular, where and I think reading comprehension is like the biggest barrier, and it's kind of underestimated. Like, you cannot play any game that has hidden information, I feel like, with anyone who's like less than a 3rd grader, in my experience so far.
Yeah.
It's just asking too much of them to read their own cards, understand the cards strategically, and really be able to do what they need to do on their own terms.
Yep, agreed.
You brought up an article a while back by Richard Garfield, I think, and it was about playing with children. This is a great article. Hopefully we can put it in the show notes for people, but he talked about, if you have a child that's willing to play games with you, they want to experience what you're experiencing, you can share that with them, and you can sort of bring them into a game that maybe has a bit of reading comprehension, right? Except you should mitigate the game to their level. And then it's almost like playing the game solo, but with a sort of an automata.
Yeah, you
right?
have like an automa that basically will make certain decision points based on you pitching them to.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can kind of tell them, you could do this, which would be good for you in these ways, or you could do this, right? And if you present every turn for them as a crossroads, but let them make the decision, they're still getting to play the game, even though you're guiding like most of the decision making. And I think that that's what a lot of kids need, or even sort of want, when they sit down with you to a more heavy game. Like,
I really like that Richard Garfield article. I think that games that are designed for kids are very good. Like, there's some very good ones out there.
Be alert.
That are both fun for the parents and for the kids. I also think there are plenty of duds that are either just bad for the parents and they have to bear through them, or that are bad for everyone. So you really got to curate your kids' games. However, I feel like people don't entertain this enough, this concept of like, you can just bring your kid into your game. It's a lot less damaging to the integrity of the game than you would think. And, obviously, asterisk, this isn't for every game, but I've done this to a great degree of success with Camel Up. My daughter is like, I want to play camels. And then she'll, instead of saying like, you have these 4 actions, what we'll do is like, hey, do you think a camel is going to win? Or, which camel do you think is going to win? Or do you want to roll a die? And usually she'll just want to roll a die anyway. In that way, she's a player in the game. The other one I've had success with is Great Western Trail, surprisingly. She loves playing Cowboys. That's the name of the game for her. I think she really likes the appeal of the second edition's board and colors and everything. Even though there's a bunch of upkeep that's going on, the decisions as far as what you can do are usually pretty limited because you can only move up to like 3 spots. And so I'll tell her, like, do you want to sell your cows, or do you want to build a building, or do you want to move your train? And then she'll tell me what she wants, and I'll move her to the correct spot and do all the upkeep. It's very surprising how easy it is to play Great Western Trail with little children. That is one where she'll lose interest. For going back to the age not just being comprehension, you got to be ready to either run the Automa yourself or give up on that game or something, because usually little kids are not going to be able to complete an entire game of Great Western Trail, even if they're enjoying it for a large portion of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, like how surprising it can be. And especially I feel between the ages of 4 and 6 is where like you can be surprised the most, right? They're either just starting school or they're in preschool. And so you think like, their cognition is not necessarily that strong or whatever. They can grok like surprisingly heady concepts, which I guess is why like chess is the way that it is. It's getting kids in as early as possible. And it's kind of just guiding them through the gameplay like this, but they develop an intuition really quickly. And it's amazing seeing like the neuroplasticity at work, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Children never cease to impress me with how much they're able to critically think about their moves or basically play into the game more than you expected. All right, we're going to try this segue here. And while children never cease to impress me with how good they are at playing games, parents never cease to impress me in how bad they are.
Right.
So parents, the elderly, I'm kind of grouping them together. I know that some folks' parents are younger than others. Maybe they've only played some of the more conventional games that are sold in stores, or, like card games that are played in families, but they have some kind of knowledge to pull upon. They're not a blank slate. Also, they probably already have opinions about board games. That's the other thing. Whereas kids, it's a game, they're usually going to be on board. So there's a few tricky things to navigate here, and I'm sure these are things that you've experienced with your family. What are the potential things to keep in mind when you're playing with your parents?
I've found that if the game is light on theme, it better be fucking light. The theme often goes a long way. I think it's just a fact that, understanding like the narrative arc of a game is a lot easier than trying to parse why these priests are discarding stuff from the table and then scooping stuff off the floor to make paper mache creatures.
You're saying Latinai and mom don't go well together?
Probably not ideal to get mom on the Carl Chudyk train. Again, like you're going to have to take basically everything we say this episode to with varying degrees of salt, because your family might be different. Your family might be epic. My parents are old, relatively speaking, to most people's parents, I think. I don't push for things like that often, but, I mentioned a small list of games that we've played before, and my mom always, I think, is open-minded. Generally, I just try not to take advantage of the generosity of their time, just leverage it towards games that I know have the intrigue of the depth of strategy with the sort of light on rules overhead. Low mental ease, I think, is typically where I like to go with these, and not the games that kind of require a lot of people up front, right?
Yeah.
Not typically what I'm looking for.
Yeah, low mental ease is a big one. If you are going to go with something that is a bit trickier to teach, might I suggest overlapping with mechanisms that they're familiar with? So trick taking. A lot of families grew up playing euchre or bridge or hearts. Should I just keep going? Or spades. Or if your family happens to be familiar with trick taking, it's going to be a lot easier to get them to play the crew. I think this is one where you can get into a game that you really enjoy and actually get them on board. Again, this hedges on your family being familiar with trick taking. I don't recommend going this route if they've never done that when you were growing up. Another one that's pretty common is like Rummy. If your family plays either Mahjong or like Rummy Cube, you can get them into Rummy adjacent games. And then the third one is if they really like poker, or if they really, really like games that have that like either risk taking or bluffing, it's a lot easier to get them into the games that we talk about a lot on the podcast, you know, Skull, Ink and Gold, Can't Stop, things like that. You know, games where either there's a trying to determine what people actually have kind of mindset, or trying to see how far you can go without quote unquote busting. I feel like those are like common grounds that you can achieve with your family that tend to show up and are really approachable from both ends.
There's a shut up and sit down video where Quinns talks about teaching a game and being the teacher. And one of the things he mentions in the video is you can sort of build up expectations over time so that by the time you're teaching Pandemic, your family has already learned action selection, cooperative strategy, card or hand management, like all the sort of taken for granted mechanics that go into something like Pandemic, which isn't even that heady of a game, but even headier stuff, you know, like Twilight Imperium maybe, can be approached when you've laid that foundation one piece at a time. So if you start with something like Love Letter maybe, and then what are some of the other examples he has? Like trick-taking games where it's like, it's featuring one mechanic. It's not doing anything convoluted. It's, you know, you start with Stone Age to get worker placement going. And then you progress slowly, right? So like...
Wow, if you're at Stone Age, I mean, you've already made it pretty far, I feel like.
Yeah, in a way, like a little bit. And there's probably even simpler worker placement games out there, right? But like if you've played Dominion, maybe this time you could bring Clank if you're not really interested in playing Dominion again. Although you probably should play Dominion again because it's just the best.
I'm probably not going to do this, but it would be fun to do a 1-year project that is like the selling of the paperclip, but it's like teaching my mom games. Mm-hmm. Like you start with tic-tac-toe and by the end of it, you get to like Kanban EV or something.
Yeah, maybe something like that. I mean, you have your list out there, the 100 games list, and it is ordered from like lightest to heaviest.
I want to leave us with one thing that we haven't talked about too much yet, and that is how to pace or figure out the actual sequencing of the gameplay with your family. And what I mean by that is I think it's important when you first start teaching the game to say that there's no pressure and to say like this, you know, to share why you enjoy this and why you think they would like it, but that if we're not feeling it, it's perfectly okay to stop as the game is being taught or as we're starting to play the game. Nothing is going to make somebody not want to play with you again at the next family event more than being forced to play 2 hours of a game that they're not enjoying. I think it's okay to take those L's and to acknowledge that something misfired and to not force it. Similar to the like picking the right game. If you do end up picking something that you thought would work but doesn't, stop it while you're ahead and make it understood that it's not because you're disappointed in your family members. It's because you want to make sure that we move to something that's more enjoyable. And maybe that's not playing a game. Maybe that's watching a movie or something. But like, don't make the mistake of, oh, well, we got to keep going until the game's over.
We started this game of Food Chain Magnate. We have to see it through.
Yeah. Oh, we came full circle. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or worse, hey, are you all having fun? And everybody going like, no, yes, this is fine. And them smiling because they feel like they're worried of upsetting you. So even though they're not having a good time, they're like going through with it. And
this can be more challenging depending on kind of like how passive aggressive your family can be, I imagine, or maybe just they have not built a habit of advocating for themselves. And you're right. Like, it should very much be on you to say right at the top, like, my feelings will not be hurt if we start this and y'all aren't feeling it.
Tom and I don't have an issue with this, but I recognize that, like, not.
I'm just kidding.
I recognize that there are people who really struggle with this. Like, there's a completionist sense of we gotta finish the game. But just remember, like, your relationships are more important than the outcome of this particular game. In conclusion, go out, buy your copies of Food Chain Magnate on the secondary market, and
don't wait for the reprint. Buy the original copy.
Buy the original. Get it to the table with Nana this holiday season. She's gonna love it.
Let the 4-year-old play it too.
Yep.
I don't see how it goes wrong. Yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this week's podcast. We appreciate everybody who continues to listen to us. You're incredible. If you're hearing this episode, we love you. And thank you especially to Michael, Tyler, Devon, and Josh of the Boise RainBeaus for that awesome segue. Thanks to Bonehouse for letting us use their song Rot as our opening theme.
If you're loving the cast, share it with a friend or on Reddit or on BGG. It's the best thing you can do to help us grow. For general discussion, we now have a dedicated thread on BGG, so come join us there. If you'd prefer to reach out to us directly, you can always send us an email at shelfstablecast@gmail.com. All of this and more is going to be available in the show notes, so I'll post those links. Tom, next week we got our special end of the year segment, so we're gonna be compiling some stuff for you. I don't think we want to do lists. It's not that we're opposed to lists. It's just that it's not something
we don't want to become BuzzFeed.
It's just not something that we feel like we can contribute anything that other creators haven't already done. So I think instead we're going to do like our hot picks for certain key topics, our favorite things we played this year, things like that. Thanks everybody.
Bye.